Hello everyone, and welcome to this explainer. If you're gearing up for competitive exams, well, you already know ancient history is an absolute goldmine for marks. Today we're conquering Chapter 3, the Vedic Age, and we are going to extract every single crucial detail from our source material. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to break down every factual detail into 5 thematic pillars, moving from their origins all the way to their religion, and we'll wrap the whole thing up with a rapid final revision to guarantee you are exam ready.
Section 1. Origins in Geography. The Aryan Journey.
To really understand this journey, we first need to look at the words themselves. Vedic comes from Veda, which literally means knowledge, and Arya meant a noble man. Now, this era is split into 2 phases. The Early Vedic, or Rigvedic Age, running from 1500 to 1000 BCE, and the later Vedic Age from 1000 to 600 BCE. What's actually fascinating here, and highly testable, is how dramatically this culture differed from the Indus Valley civilization. Think of it like night and day. The Indus Valley was this highly urban culture. They used bronze, they had a pictographic script, and there's no clear evidence they used horses. The Vedic civilization? Completely different. They were rural. They brought horses with them, eventually used iron extensively, and the Rigveda even specifically mentions them wearing defensive armor, like coats of mail and helmets in warfare.
So you might be wondering, where did the Aryans actually come from? Well, scholars completely disagree on this, and matching these scholars to their theories is a very frequent exam question. Max Muller's Central Asia theory is for sure the most widely cited. But get this, can you imagine them migrating from the North Pole? No way, right? But that was actually Bal Gangadhar Tilak's official theory. We also have Swami Dayanand Saraswati pointing to Tibet as their homeland, Dr. Avinash Chandra Das pointing to the Sapta Sindhu region, and P. Ganganath Jha suggesting the Brahmarshi Desh. Mentally grouping these specific scholars with their regions is absolutely crucial and will definitely save you on test day.
Wherever they came from, they eventually settled in the land of 7 rivers. These rivers were literally their lifelines, so knowing their ancient names is incredibly key. Let's run through them. Asakini is today's Chenab, and Vipasa is the Bias. Parushni is the modern Ravi, Vitasta is the Jhelum, Kuha is Kabul, and Shutadri is the Sutlej. Now here's a detail you can't miss. While the river Indus, or Sindhu, is mentioned the absolute most times in the Rigveda, actually earning the title Hiranyaye because of its massive economic importance, the most sacred river was actually the Saraswati. They revered it as Nadi Tama, meaning the best of all rivers.
Section 2. Vedic Literature. Foundations of Knowledge.
This immense, sprawling body of literature is collectively known as Shruti, which beautifully translates to that which is heard. It's divided into 2 main branches, the ritualistic Karmakanda, made of the Samhitas and Brahmanas, and the deeply philosophical Gyan-kanda, comprising the Aryanas and Upanishads. So there are 4 Vedas in total, but the first 3, the Rig, Yajur, and Sama, make up the sacred trio, known as the Vedatraya. The foundational text, the Rigveda, was originally written down in the Brahmi script, and it was chanted by a specific priest known as a Hota. And here's a brilliant detail that trips people up. The concept of moksha, or ultimate liberation, doesn't even appear in the early Vedas. It actually first emerges later in the Upanishads. Diving a bit deeper into the Rigveda, it is absolutely massive. We're talking 10 mandals, 1,028 suktas, and over 10,000 verses. The core of it, mandals 2 through 7, are the oldest parts. You'll definitely want to connect these specific oldest mandals to their writers. Vishwamitra famously penned the 3rd mandal, Vamdev the 4th, and Atri the 5th. Then we have Bhardwaj for the 6th, Vasista for the 7th, and Kanva and Angiras for the 8th. The 9th mandal stands out as totally unique because it is entirely devoted to just a single deity, Soma.
So the crucial point is understanding exactly how the other 3 Vedas differ. This is exam gold. The Yajurveda is split into 2 parts, Shukla and Krishna. It contains the Shatpath Brahmana, which is highly respected, placed just after the Rigveda in importance, and it even explicitly mentions the Purushameda. Then there's the Samaveda, which is the shortest of them all. It's deeply connected to music and was chanted at major ceremonies. Finally, the Atharvaveda, where the presiding priest is called a Brahma, steps completely away from high philosophy. Instead, it deals with the daily, gritty life of common people. It covers things like Ayurveda, disease prevention, and even local superstitions and spells.
Section 3. Society and Daily Life, How the Aryans Lived.
To really grasp their daily life, we first have to realize this society was fiercely patriarchal. Just to give you an idea of a father's sheer authority back then, the Varun Sukta explicitly mentions that a father could actually sell his own child. Wow! Now, society was eventually structured around 4 ashramas, or stages of life: brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa. Within this overarching structure, 2 specific words shaped almost everything: gotra and varna. Originally, the word gotra simply meant a cow shelter or a herd of cows, and it only later evolved to mean a family lineage. As for varna, meaning color or class, that specific concept makes its very first appearance in the famous Purusha Sukta, found in the Rigveda's 10th mandal.
If you were to time travel and walk through a Vedic village, these are the everyday terms you'd hear being tossed around. For food, they heavily relied on yava, which is barley, and vrihi, which is rice. If you saw a particularly wealthy person, they might be wearing a nishka, a highly valued gold necklace. For everyday clothing, a garment called vasas was worn above the waist and a nivi was worn below. Looking around the village square, you'd probably see a teksha doing carpentry work, a karmar working as a metal worker, or maybe someone quietly visiting a veknut to borrow some money.
A typical Vedic life wasn't random. It was meticulously mapped out by 16 sanskaras, or rites of passage, that flowed chronologically from before birth to after death. They start right from the very beginning, with conception and birth rituals, like Garbhadahana, Punsavanana, and Simantanayana, followed immediately by Jatakarma at birth. Then comes childhood, with Namakarana for naming the baby, Nishkramana, Anaprasana for their first solid food, Chudakarma, and Karnaveda. Moving into youth, we see a heavy focus on education rites: Vidyaramba, Upayana, Vedaramba, Kashant, and Samavakana. Finally, life culminates in adulthood with Vivaha or marriage, leading all the way at the very end to Antiesti, the final cremation ritual.
Section 4. Economy and Administration, Rulers and Wealth.
Economically speaking, they weren't building massive trade empires at first. It was literally all about cattle. Cattle breeding was their absolute top economic activity, and cows were the primary medium of exchange for everything. When it came to governance, it was usually a descended, inherited monarchy. But these kings weren't absolute dictators ruling with an iron fist. So how did they actually govern? Through 2 vital assemblies, the Sabha and the Samathi. The Atharvaveda famously refers to the Sabha and Samathi as the 2 daughters of Prajapati. The Sabha was this elite, exclusive assembly of the learned that handled judicial functions, while the Samathi was the larger, broad national assembly made up of the common people.
And this brilliantly illustrates the highly sophisticated bureaucracy they developed over time around the king. It wasn't a one-man show, it was a full-team effort. The Senani headed up the army, while the Gramini ran the day-to-day of the village. The Bhagduth had the tough job of collecting taxes, and the Sangrahita guarded the treasury. It's fascinating to see these highly specialized roles emerge so early, like the Sudha specifically leading the chariot army, and the Akshava Cup crunching the numbers as the royal accountant.
Remember how we just talked about how vital cattle were? Because of this immense value, the cow was legally classified as aganya, which literally means not worthy to be killed. Its status was supremely pious. On the entirely other end of the economic spectrum, the term pani in the Rigvedic period referred to a specific, active class of citizens who served as the traders and merchants, basically keeping the local economy moving.
Section 5. Religion and Philosophy. Gods and Cosmic Order.
Their early religion was deeply rooted in nature worship and yajnas, which are sacrifices. They practiced a really fascinating philosophical concept called Ika Ike Vada. Basically, this meant that whichever god they happened to be praising in that specific moment was considered the supreme deity. It was also an era of epic, legendary conflicts, most notably the famous Battle of 10 Kings, which was fought on the banks of the Parushni, or what we now call the Ravi River. Now, they categorized their gods into 3 realms: sky, space, and earth. Indra, the god of space, was the absolute powerhouse of the pantheon. He was hailed as Purandara, meaning the destroyer of forts, and has a whopping 250 hymns dedicated to him. Agni followed closely with 200 hymns. Amazingly, we even have concrete proof of these gods existing outside of India. The 14th century BC bogus Khoi inscription, found in modern-day Turkey, explicitly mentions Indra, Varuna, Mitra, and Nasatyas.
At the absolute philosophical core of this entire age were 2 very profound concepts: Dharma and Rita. Dharma represented personal obligations and the faithful discharge of duties to oneself and to others. Rita, on the other hand, was something much bigger. It was the fundamental, universal moral law that literally governed the functioning of the entire cosmos. The god Varuna was seen as the ultimate upholder of this natural cosmic order, which earned him the highly reverent title Ritasya Gopa.
Let's move to our rapid final revision and see how this builds your exam readiness. You've absorbed a massive amount of high-yield data today, so let's lock in those top 5 takeaways before you go. First, always remember to contrast the urban Bronze Age Indus Valley with our rural iron and horse-using Aryans. Second, master those rivers. Sindhu holds the record for most mentions, but Saraswati takes the crown for sacredness. Third, keep in mind that mandals 2 to 7 are the oldest in the Rigveda. Fourth, drill that unique vocabulary into your head, like Yava for barley and Nishka for gold. And finally, never forget the Sabha and Samiti, those 2 vital assemblies that kept the king's power in check.
I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. Thousands of years ago, the Aryans conceptualized Rita as a universal cosmic law, long before any modern constitutions even existed. So how does this ancient balance between universal moral law, Rita, and personal duty, Dharma, still echo in the way we govern our societies and write our laws today? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you in the next one.